the markets clearly heard what they wanted to hear there, or something that really made them, a lot more exuberant. But I heard Powell say, look, folks, taming inflation is still my priority number 1, 2, and 3, right? Like, that hasn't changed, and I'm not changing course here. There's going to be more rate hikes. I'm going to do whatever I think it takes to tame it. And the plan is still multiple rate hikes from here, and then a pause that's likely going to last through the rest of the year. He mentioned disinflation about 15 times in that discussion, which is supportive of his, I'm going to do everything I can to bring inflation down. And hey, we're beginning to already see, that my campaign to destroy demand is beginning to work. But probably more importantly, he I thought took pains to talk about the delayed impact that he expects from the 450 basis points that have already been done, right? So, I heard him say, like, hey, I talked earlier that this was going to cause some pain in getting inflation under control. And in terms of the pain that we're going to see, you ain't seen nothing yet, folks, because the demand destruction from everything I've already done to date is just beginning to manifest now. So anyways, he also, and this was one of the things that maybe the market's keyed off of, he said he's not super worried about financial conditions at any particular given time. And I don't know, maybe that was the trigger word for the markets here, but to me, he just said, like, I don't really care what financial conditions, loose, tight, whatever. I'm just getting inflation under control here. So why, I guess, did you take away anything else from all of that? And why do you think the markets became so sanguine after that?
Well, you almost sound like you got everything under control.
I don't know about that.
So let's maybe take a step back, right? The reason we listen to the Fed is because the Fed controls a big bazooka. So that's why we care. Now, I think we all agree on that. The second portion, though, already, with you iterating all this, and that's why I cynically put in there that you think that Powell has this under control, all of what you're saying somehow suggests that Powell has a good framework. He's not going to do this until inflation is under control and this and that. And I think that is where I have the biggest issue. And I'll talk about the rest of what you say in a moment, but Powell does not have a framework that's decent, no matter how you look at it. When a higher for longer is not a framework, it's not a strategy. He can, of course, hike rates, and he can wait for inflation to maybe come down, but there is no coherent framework. Larry Summers said, in order to get out of high inflation, you need a new framework. You need a strategy. And what it means is where the Powell should go. Once you have high inflation, it becomes volatile. It becomes jumpy. And by all means, the year-over-year comparisons are getting better. And so odds are that for the coming months, the inflation readings are going to be okay. No guarantee of that, but that's all right. But then what, right? What is he going to do? And so I just put that out there, that creates an inherent instability. So that's number two. Number three is...
Can I just repeat that in a different way for you to say whether I'm thinking of this right or not? But it sounds like you're saying, rather than having a plan for where it's taking things, the Fed is just in reaction mode.
They are tactical rather than strategic, might be a nice way of phrasing it. Okay. Reaction mode is also still very polite. It's more than that, though, because markets function better when you know what the bazooka is going to do. I don't want to really use the word loose cannon because that's not exactly what he is, but there needs to be a plan of how he's going to use the bazooka.
So maybe like an aimless cannon,
something like that. Yeah. So let's take the second of these bullets, if you wish. What you see is what you get. And so now I don't like what the Fed is doing. Well, who cares, right? What matters is what the Fed does. So what the Fed has said is going to do is they're going to be higher for longer. And that's precisely what they're going to do. And they're going to do this. When inflation comes down, it's going to be okay. But he doesn't want to be another Arthur Burns. Arthur Burns was the Fed president of the early 70s, and we have to thank for, in part at least, for stagflation. And so he wants to be higher for longer. And that means he wants to have an excuse to pause. The excuse to pause is, on the one hand, no jobs reports that are out of whack on the upside,
Mhm.
and inflation reports that are in line. And so when we spoke last, I said, well, my expectation is we're going to pause in May. That's because the year-over-year comparisons are going to look somewhat decent for the first quarter. And then in May, they're going to say, all right, we'll do when we wait. Now, we had on last Friday, we had jobs report that we can talk about as to the details, but the short of it, it was much stronger than most people had expected. And so that says, oh my God, we can't do it. And by the end of that day, it took several hours. The market priced in that indeed we'll get another rate hike in June as well. So then we get another rate hike. And so now we're there. And so now we're going to wait again until the next data point comes in. If the next inflation report is benign, it's not going to change much. If the next jobs report, the GDP report is very bad, we might take that second rate hike off the table again.
We're now talking just like less than an hour, I think, after Powell finished his discussion there at the Economic Club in Washington. The markets sort of leapt, and then they came back down to flat. Now it looks like they're coming back up again. So not entirely sure if they've made up their mind yet how they want to interpret it. But did he say anything else today that's germane to the discussion here?
I think it's relevant that he didn't say too much different, because you mentioned 15 times disinflation. I think it was 11 or 12, but let's not argue about details here.
Double digits,
right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's many, many times. And he used those words again. Now, the one when the market dipped after during Powell's speech, when he talked about how these strong economic numbers might get them to be higher for longer. He didn't use exactly those words, but and so a lot of that is, of course, the market, the media just interpreting into what the market is doing. And maybe there are some bots that trade right away on any syllable that he says. Ultimately, what matters is what is he going to do? And there, by the way, the other thing to keep in mind is the folks voting at the Fed, and there are certain numbers are there each month. But then there are several people that rotate on a yearly basis. We have a far more dovish composition at the Fed this year versus last year. And so he's going to get more pushback against these rate hikes as they come along. Now, clearly, if you have more than 500,000 jobs created each month, they all can say, well, it's all right. We're not going to cause too much damage if we hike further. But I wouldn't be surprised if the economic data are going to be quite mixed, which means those dissenting voices are going to get louder. And that's going to make the messaging more difficult. By the way, one of the things that Powell had lamented is that the market doesn't take him seriously, right? Well, part of it is, and the market is somehow so much faster in absorbing information. Well, maybe the market is a little bit faster, but the key thing that has changed is forward guidance. So when the Fed finally decided to hike rates, they said everything they're going to do over the next 12 months or whatever it was. And guess what? If you do that, the market is going to price it in with some skepticism, but for the most part. And so the side effect of that is, and we talk about rates, is the so-called financial conditions, right? The whole point of hiking rates is to tighten financial conditions, to make it more difficult to have access to credit. That means to coerce the system to delever, to induce bankruptcies with weak players, with zombie companies, but not to cause financial mayhem. So you don't want the wheels to be falling off. And what had happened, because quote unquote everything had been priced in, is the market got used to it, and now financial conditions aren't as tight. And so the question is then, well, are they going to just be hiking a little bit more? The answer, I think, is they'll be somewhat, to use that word, data dependent, meaning if you have a upside surprise jobs report, maybe they'll consider hiking one more time.